Welcome to Crazy Good Turns. Our goal is to celebrate people who do good deeds, big or small. We discover our stories through research and with help from you, our listeners. Visit our website at crazygoodturns.org/celebrate to tell us about a person or organization who's done something great for someone else, and they could be featured in an upcoming episode. In fact, today's episode was submitted to us by Shelby Forsythia from Chicago. Many thanks, Shelby, and we've sent you some Crazy Good Turn swag and appreciation. As always, thanks for listening.
I was diagnosed when I was 39 years old. I woke up one morning and I felt my breast and I felt a lump in my breast and immediately called my OBGYN and got an appointment with him. When I went to see him, he did an exam and he said to me, he goes, "I'm going to send you for a biopsy, but I'll tell you right now, you have cancer."
That's Janine Patton-Coble talking about the day she learned she may have breast cancer. The biopsy later that week confirmed her cancer, and the doctor gave her a 1 in 4 chance of surviving.
When he told me I had about a 25% chance of it a year, I decided that, I need to fire him and find somebody who's not going to tell me that and treat me differently because I didn't want to be treated like I wasn't going to make it past a year. And that I was going to very systematically get on the right train. And what I mean by that is I feel like there's 2 trains that leave the station. One train, every single stop is every doctor's appointment, every treatment, every conversation about your cancer, and those are your stops. And then the other train leaves, and every stop is your kids' Christmas play and a basketball game and a sleepover party and going to the movies with your friends. I made a conscious decision to get on that train that was about living and not the train that was about dying.
1 in 8 women in the U.S. will develop breast cancer in their life. More than 40,000 women will die of breast cancer this year. Most women are blindsided by it, as 85% have no family history of breast cancer, which was the case with Janine. Breast cancer is the basis of our story today, but it's not Janine's story. Hers is about that train she chose to board, and how doing so has helped hundreds of families fight breast cancer through the nonprofit she founded, Little Pink Houses of Hope. This is Crazy Good Turns. We tell inspiring stories about people who do amazing things for others, and I'm your host, Brad Shaw. Janine was diagnosed with cancer on June 15, 2009. She and her family had a long-planned summer vacation scheduled to start literally the next day.
I sat in the doctor's office and, I got all of this heavy news. I looked at my husband and I grabbed his hand and I said, we're supposed to be going on our yearly vacation to the beach tomorrow. We had went to the same house, the same week, the same beach for close to 12, 13 years. It was a planned vacation, and I asked my doctor, I said, what do I do? Do I cancel my vacation? And he looked at me just kind of stone cold sober, and he said, no, you need to go on this vacation because as soon as you get back, you are ours for about a year and a half, meaning all of the treatment I would have to go through and everything like that. And he said, take the chance to process it with your family.
Every year, Janine, her husband Terry, and son Jake drove from their home in Burlington, North Carolina to Buxton, a beautiful little beach town on the southern tip of North Carolina's Outer Banks. Janine and Terry had resolved to fight her cancer as a family, as a team, and this vacation would be the start. And they decided the beach was the best place to break the news to Jake.
We got to our beach house, and I looked at my husband, and he kind of looked at me like, are you ready to tell him? And I said, oh, gosh, no, get me out of here. I decided to go for a run. During that run, that was my time when I was trying to come up with all of the right words. Like if I could have won an Academy Award as a mom for doing it right, that was my goal that day, was just have the right words to tell this little boy what's happening.
Janine went for a run to find the right words for Jake and ended up finding her life's mission.
I ran just a little bit further than I ever had previously. I ran across this old abandoned compound of houses. I had no idea what it was. I now know it was 43 houses, if that gives you an idea of the scope of it. But it was 43 houses with a chain link fence around it, completely abandoned. It had locks on it and everything if you want to do the real picture, there was like a play set with the swings swinging in the beach wind. And it just really piqued my interest. And I was like, what is this place? As I was turning to run back to our beach house, I literally physically was struck with, you need to create a place like this for cancer patients to come.
This was far more than just an idea. Janine describes the moment in almost cosmic terms. To this day, she can't fully explain it.
The best way I can describe it, there's actually a Hebrew word called ruha, and I could be totally butchering that, hopefully not, but a Hebrew word called ruha, which means the breath of life. It's probably the best phrasing I've ever heard because that's what it felt like. It felt like God just kind of reached in and just grabbed my heart and just touched my heart in a way that I never imagined possible. Because I really wasn't a person that was very religious. Didn't really go to church, dropped in here and there, went to make my mom happy sometimes. But I really didn't have a connection with God at all. The idea that he was speaking to me was something I was not ready to understand at all at that point. For me, I literally stood up after being physically kind of struck by this and didn't immediately go out and do something fabulous. I went back to the beach house and told my husband, they checked my breast for cancer, but they clearly didn't check my brain because I must be going crazy. I must have brain cancer because there's no way that God is talking to me or that I'm being called for anything else. Like, I'm just not that person.
Putting that bigger calling aside for the moment, Janine still had to tackle the task at hand, telling Jake.
I got back to the beach house and we sat down to tell my son that I had been diagnosed. And to this day, there is still nothing that has been more difficult in my life than telling that little 11-year-old boy. I still remember telling him and just telling him that I had been diagnosed with cancer. Kids will cut you to the quick. They don't wait around for the right question. They just kind of blurt out the question that's first on their mind. And his very first question to me was, "Are you going to die?" I told him, I said, I can't answer that, but I can tell you that we are going to do this together as a team. We spent that week really just processing through, but we spent that week setting the tone for exactly how we were going to deal with my cancer. We went parasailing and we got smashed in the ocean by these humongous waves and just had a blast giggling and laughing. And we looked for starfish in the sand. And we were determined that cancer was not going to take the stuff we loved away from us, that we were still going to be a family. We were still going to do amazing things together. Probably one of my favorite moments from that week is him and I went parasailing in a tandem parasail. And we're up super, super high. And it's so quiet when you're up that high. I looked at him and I said, I just want you to remember how peaceful it is right here. If things get bad, if things don't go well, just remember this space right here. Because this quiet, peaceful space is a space where God will always take care of you.
Janine and her family spent the rest of the week having a great time. When they got home, it was time to get to work on two fronts. First, there was her fight against breast cancer. But also, she went after that vision that struck her on the run. Her initial dream was to buy that compound of 43 beachfront houses in Buxton and paint them all pink for breast cancer awareness.
I was telling this story to my older sister, Christy, and as I was telling this story about seeing, these 43 houses and telling her that I wanted to do it for breast cancer patients, I said, I don't know, maybe I can paint them all pink. That just kind of sat with her. Then she was supposed to be at my first chemo treatment with me, but I was kind of off schedule because of something with my blood work that was wrong. And she wasn't able to be with me. She was in her car that day. And so at exactly 1 o'clock, which was exactly the time of my chemo that she couldn't be at, she turned the radio on and heard Little Pink Houses by John Cougar Mellencamp. She called me and she goes, those houses that you want to paint pink? She goes, you should call it Little Pink Houses of Hope. I give her all the credit in the world for coming up with the name for the organization. That's really what we do. We provide hope in every single interaction that we have with the people who come.
At the time, the houses were owned by the Coast Guard. During her research, Janine found out that the property was transferred to the General Services Administration and put on the auction block.
Literally about 3 months after I saw the compound and had this initial calling, it went up for sale for $6-7 million, which was so not in my price range. That wasn't an option.
Janine didn't stop dreaming. Instead, she looked for alternatives.
What I realized was that here you have this large number of homes sitting empty, and that compound was just a catalyst for me to see that there are people out there who are loving and giving and want to help. That was probably the message that I heard all throughout my own cancer diagnosis. People want to help you when you have stuff going on like that. The same is true for homeowners that have vacation home properties, whether it's at the beach or the lake or whatever. They want to be able to help people as well.
That led Janine to the notion that would become Little Pink Houses of Hope. Specifically, they would find people with vacation homes willing to donate their houses for a week as retreats for families battling breast cancer. She knew what she wanted to do, but needed help doing it.
I really had to look at formulating a business plan. I was a high school history teacher, so I had zero in terms of business experience. I could whip some 15-year-olds into shape in the classroom, but I had zero business experience. So I had to get a business plan, which I had my father help me with that. He has since passed, so my original business plan is very near and dear to my heart now.
Janine set about building Little Pink Houses of Hope while simultaneously battling breast cancer. She told me much of her work was done on a laptop in a dark room on chemo days.
It was all hatched in what could have been a very dark place, and I'm very, very thankful that there was an abundance of light that helped me get through that. And I often wonder what would have happened if I hadn't said yes, if my health wouldn't have progressed the way it did, or if mentally things would have been harder. I really was focused on making a difference for other people and being able to provide something.
In September 2010, after 16 months of chemo and radiation, doctors told Janine there was no longer evidence of the disease. She was released from treatment. Meanwhile, Janine's plans for Little Pink Houses evolved further. The model that she landed on identified small beachfront communities with multiple residents willing to open their houses for a week to the families. Each family would get its own house staffed with volunteers, often the homeowners themselves. Janine then worked with local businesses to donate or discount food, fun activities, and other services. By 2011, Little Pink Houses of Hope received its legal nonprofit status, and they held their first retreat in Carolina Beach, North Carolina.
The first group of people that came, I am still to this day amazed that they got in their cars and they came and showed up, not knowing if something would be at the other end. Because one of the things that we do is we do not tell people where they're staying. We still to this day don't tell people where they're staying. We tell them the community and where to check in, but they don't know what their house looks like. We got to the very first retreat, the very first night. Patients were introducing themselves. It was funny. I had a person from the Bronx who was accepted for the retreat. Her and her husband came down. She was really clear. She's like, we have plan B. If you guys are going to evangelize us or try to do anything to us, we're going to get in our car and leave. It was hilarious to me because I probably would have been exactly the same way because there wasn't any history of our organization. That week was an amazing week. The first week we had 6 families there, and they were from all over the United States. We did paddleboarding, we had wonderful dinners, we did stuff at the park, we did a boat cruise, we went to the aquarium. Probably the biggest takeaway out of that week was that people were desperate for similarity. So other people going through the same thing. Their journey might look different, but their language is the same. The similarity was a key piece of the puzzle. And then the other piece of the puzzle was you can have so much fun when you strip away everything else and just make it about family. We don't need to be at the best amusement park in the world to have fun. We can have fun through a family game night with a can of shaving cream and some Cheetos and some shower caps. It really made me aware how much our organization is put here to help families just connect and not necessarily the biggest, the best, the greatest of something, because the biggest, the best, the greatest that they walk away with is the love that they feel that week.
Since its founding, Little Pink Houses of Hope has held week-long retreats for more than 600 families from across the country. This year, Little Pink Houses is hosting 16 retreats coast to coast, from Southern California to Key West, virtually all in beach or lakefront towns.
I think being around water, being at the beach, you're just able to breathe better. There is something very rhythmic about the ocean. The water comes in, the water goes out, the water comes in, the water goes out. And that rhythmic nature is very settling. I mean, it's just very, very, very soothing. It also, the beach connotates a time of play. That piece of the puzzle is really important for our organization. So it's almost like this balance of being able to rest and relax and being able to be a kid and to be able to play.
Janine says the retreats have a profound impact on both the cancer patients and their families. well past their vacation week.
One of my favorite stories dates all the way back to our very first retreat. We do stand-up paddleboarding at almost every retreat we do because it's an incredibly empowering activity. You have people who think they can't do it, and they get up and they do it. So it's a very empowering activity. There was a mom, her name was Sherry, and she was on the paddleboard. She was shaking like a leaf. Really, she was terrified. And I paddled up right next to her. And as I paddled up next to her, I said, all right, Sherry, you can go back to the shore if you want. And she goes, no. She goes, this is how I want my boys to remember me, that I will always try everything, always give it your best, never be too scared to get out of your comfort zone. She turned in that moment as she was saying it, and her two boys were standing on the shore, literally cheering, going, look at you, Mom. Yay, you did it. You did it. She looked at me and she goes, that's why what you do is so important. And she goes, because that's what my kids are going to be left with.
In 2011, Katrina Cook was 36 years old when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. Recurring pain from a minor injury sent her to multiple doctors to determine the cause. A single mother of two boys, Katrina got about the worst diagnosis you can imagine.
I swear every time I went to the doctor, the news got worse. Every time I went, they'd say, well, this doesn't look right. We need to look at it again and take some biopsies. And then they said, well, your neck's not looking quite right. We need to do some biopsies. It took about a day for that to come back. I was actually at the doctor's office meeting with the radiation oncologist. My oncologist had me wait. She walked in the room. Again, she sat down. Just a word of advice. If you're in a room, the doctor comes in and sits down, you should prepare yourself. It's always bad news. She came in and she sat down and she said, I'm not even sure how to say this to you, but those biopsy results came back as cancer. And what that means is you're stage 4, and that's metastatic cancer. And that means that your cancer has spread from the original tumor site to distant areas in your body. And this is where we know it is. Chances are it's in a lot more places. This is where we know. That was a lot to take in at that moment. It was a whole lot to comprehend.
In 2013, still early in her fight and in the midst of treatment, Katrina and her two boys took their very first vacation ever to a Little Pink Houses retreat in Emerald Island, North Carolina.
We pulled up to this beautiful home, 3-story home. It was just my kids and I. We pulled in, and I can remember Camden, my youngest, going, Mom, they got us a mansion. And we pull into this house, and it was amazing. And the volunteer helped us get our luggage in, helped my kids unpack. I mean, I just walked in the house and did nothing. I don't even know how to describe how great that was, especially as a single mom that does everything. And is typically like a pack mule carrying everything in the house at one time. To have someone there to help was incredible. My kids that night at dinner, they got to play games, and they thought that was so cool. They got to stay up later than they usually do, and they thought that was even cooler. Totally got cool points as a mom for that.
That week, Katrina and her boys did all the things a family does at the beach. Fishing, playing ball, building sandcastles. And she met Janine for the first time.
My son Camden is the sweetest little huggy, lovey thing. He always has been. The first time he met Janine, he walked up and hugged her and told her thank you for having us on her trip. And he's 5 years old, loving on her. And she just scooped him up like she had known him her whole entire life. He will still tell you that Janine is one of his favorite people in the whole wide world. She won a fan for life at that moment. The next day we went out onto the beach. She was there running around with the kids, shooting shaving cream all over them, knocking them in the sand, playing ball, racing. She was right in there in the middle with them. And to sit back with another mom that knew what I felt, and to watch my kids be out and have fun and enjoy themselves without me having to be out doing that at that moment. There was a piece about that, kind of a, this is going to be okay moment.
Katrina says that retreat helped give her the strength to fight on. She's still fighting today. She's had more than 50 radiation treatments, and when I interviewed her, she was days away from her 107th chemo infusion. Katrina told me her doctors consider her an exceptional responder to her treatments. Janine calls her a kick-ass cancer survivor.
When you live in the metastatic world, you kind of are waiting for that bus to come, but it's sitting at the bus station just with the chalk block, and it only takes one thing to kick that chalk block out, and the bus is going to come barreling down to you. And that's just kind of the world we live in. Scan, treat, repeat, then start over. I live my medical life 6 months at a time.
We all find strength in different ways. Some find it in their faith. Others find it in family. Some just dig down and find it in themselves. And sometimes we can find strength and courage in someone else's story.
One of the things that I remember the most about the families there was a young mom there from Florida. She was just a little bit older than me. She had been diagnosed metastatic also. The very last night, we were on the beach and we kind of do our goodbyes that night and what'd you get out of this week kind of thing. And she pulled me to the side and she said, I just want you to know that you're the first metastatic person I've ever met on this journey. Before I came here last week, I sat down with my doctor and we made the decision that I couldn't do this anymore. I'm stopping all my treatments. I'm tired. I'm just so tired. She said, this is my farewell trip with my son because I can't do it anymore. That was the discussion she had with her doctor the week prior. She told me that night, she said, you have completely changed, and this week has completely changed my view on this whole thing. She had already contacted her doctor and told her that she was not ready to give up. And she's actually still with us today. She's still in Florida and doing well.
They say that cancer eventually touches every family in some way. It has with mine. My dad died of cancer about 10 years ago, and my sister-in-law is a breast cancer survivor. I still dream about my dad sometimes, and thankfully it's always the hale and hearty younger version of him, not the one I saw so sick at the end. Maybe that's his way of telling me that cancer might have taken his life, but he still won the fight. Thanks for listening to this episode of our podcast. Go to crazygoodturns.org to learn more about or donate to Little Pink Houses of Hope. You can also submit your ideas for people or organizations we should feature. And stay connected with us between episodes by following us on Facebook and Twitter. Our show is audio engineered by Stephen Keith. Music supervision and mixing by Score in Los Angeles. A special thanks to Megan Basinger, and I'm your host, Brad Shaw.
She has dedicated her life to helping make this journey that we're on together a little bit easier for the families and for the patients. And a gift like that is worth all the money in the world.